The knock came in the middle of the night, sharp and careful, as if whoever made it understood exactly how fragile silence could be. Evan Calder woke instantly. Years of living alone on the edge of human space had trained his mind to rise before fear could catch up. He lay still in his narrow bed, eyes open, counting his breaths. Outside, the wind moved softly through the tall grass. The old farmhouse creaked in its familiar way. Nothing else should have been there. No one knocked after curfew. Everyone knew that. Evan slid one hand beneath his pillow and wrapped his fingers around the grip of his old shock pistol. It was outdated, slow to charge, and barely legal, but it had saved him once before. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood quietly listening. Another knock followed, not louder, not desperate, just patient. That was what unsettled him most. He crossed the room, careful not to turn on the lights. The house was small, built long before the Coalition patrol routes had shifted outward. Its walls were thick, its systems simple. Evan liked it that way. Complicated systems failed too easily. He paused at the door and checked the external sensor display mounted beside it. The camera flickered once, then steadied. Someone stood on his porch. She was tall, taller than most humans, and thin in a way that looked fragile but not weak. She wore layers of mismatched clothing that clearly did not belong together. One sleeve hung too long. The boots were human-made but far too large, wrapped tight with strips of fabric. Her skin was a pale gray-blue, faintly reflective in the porch light. Her hair, if it could be called that, fell in smooth, dark strands that moved slightly, as if reacting to air Evan could not feel. She looked directly at the camera. Evan swallowed. Aliens were not unheard of in human territory, but they did not wander alone. They did not knock on doors in the middle of the night, and they certainly did not look like this, exposed, injured, and very clearly afraid. The sensor pinged softly, highlighting signs of physical distress. Elevated temperature, unsteady posture, a dark stain spreading across the fabric at her side. She raised one hand slowly and pressed it flat against the door. "Please," she said. Her voice came through the external speaker, calm but strained. Her accent bent the words carefully, as if each one had been learned through effort rather than habit. "I request shelter." Evan closed his eyes for a brief moment. Request, not beg, not demand. That alone told him she was not human. He leaned closer to the speaker. "You know where you are?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she replied. "This is a human settlement, independent dwelling, no registered security contract." Evan's jaw tightened. "And you know that helping you is illegal?" "Yes." Another pause. She did not look away. Her breathing was shallow now. "I am injured," she continued. "Coalition recovery units are active in this region. If I am found, I will be terminated. I was informed that humans sometimes offer shelter even when it is unwise." That was not something Evan had ever heard spoken aloud by a non-human. He glanced toward the dark fields beyond the porch. His sensors showed no patrols nearby, but that meant very little. Coalition drones moved quietly, efficiently. "How do you know about me?" he asked. "You are not listed in Coalition habitation records," she said. "You maintain obsolete systems. You have declined 3 integration offers. You have no dependents." Evan exhaled slowly. "So I'm convenient." She tilted her head slightly. "You are statistically suitable." That almost made him laugh, almost. Another wave of pain crossed her face. She steadied herself against the doorframe. Evan made his decision before he could think himself out of it. He disengaged the lock. The door opened with a soft hiss. She stepped inside, and the night air followed her in for just a second before Evan sealed it behind her. The house lights came up automatically, revealing more than the camera ever could. She was worse off than he thought. The injury at her side was not a simple wound. The skin there was torn in a pattern that looked burned and cut at the same time. Dark fluid seeped through the cloth, thicker than blood, shimmering faintly. Her breathing hitched as she moved, and her balance wavered. Evan caught her arm without thinking. Her skin was warm, smoother than it looked, and reacted slightly under his touch, changing tone. "Sit," he said, guiding her toward the small table near the kitchen. She obeyed immediately, lowering herself with care. Her posture remained straight despite the pain, as if discipline was something she could not turn off. Evan retrieved his medical kit from the wall cabinet. It was human-made, basic, stocked for accidents and minor emergencies. It would not be designed for her species, whatever it was. "I can't promise this will help," he said. "I understand," she replied. "Assistance is preferable to none." He cut away the damaged fabric carefully. The wound beneath made his stomach tighten. The edges shimmered unnaturally, as if reality itself had been scraped. "What did this?" he asked. "Containment weapon," she said. "Non-lethal by coalition standards." Evan snorted. "Figures." He worked slowly, cleaning the area with a neutral solution and applying a broad-spectrum sealant. The med kit beeped uncertainly, clearly unhappy with the biology it was reading. She watched him closely, her dark eyes never leaving his hands. "You are calm," she observed. "I'm scared," Evan replied. "I just don't find that useful right now." That seemed to amuse her faintly. "That aligns with recorded human behavior." He glanced up at her. "You study us?" "Yes." The sealant settled, glowing faintly before dulling. The bleeding slowed. "That should keep you stable for now," Evan said. "Name?" "Salith," she answered. "Archivist first class." "Archivist," he repeated. "That explains the formal speech." She inclined her head. "I am trained in preservation and analysis of historical and predictive data." "And that got you shot." "It got me hunted." Evan leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms. "What did you find?" For the first time, she hesitated. "Information classified beyond your clearance," she said carefully. He raised an eyebrow. "I don't have a clearance." "Exactly." Outside, something moved in the distance. Evan's sensors flickered briefly. He turned toward the display, tension snapping tight through him. A patrol drone passed overhead, its lights muted, its scan brief but thorough. It moved on without slowing. The silence afterward felt heavier. "They're close," Evan said. "Yes," Salith replied. "They will expand the search radius." He looked at her again, really looked at her. "Why come here? You could have hidden anywhere." She met his gaze. "Because humans are unpredictable." "That word again," she continued, voice quieter now. "My people rely on models, probability trees, behavioral forecasts. Humans consistently resist accurate prediction, especially when isolated from centralized authority." "So you're gambling," Evan said. "Yes," he rubbed his face. "You know, harboring you could get me erased from the registry, maybe worse." "I know, and you still knocked." "Yes." Another pause settled between them. Finally, Evan moved. He crossed the room and pulled the heavy curtain closed over the front window. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll figure out the rest in the morning." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Thank you." He gestured toward the small spare room. "You can use that." As she stood, she swayed slightly. Evan steadied her again. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered. "No," she agreed softly, "but neither should what I learned." Later, after Salith had settled into the spare room and the house had returned to a quiet that felt false, Evan sat alone at the table. He stared at the door, replaying the moment he had opened it. Humans were not supposed to matter much in the wider galaxy. That was what the Coalition always said. Useful, adaptable, but ultimately minor. Yet an alien archivist had crossed patrol lines, risked termination, and placed her life in the hands of a solitary human farmer because she believed that mattered. Outside, far above the clouds, Coalition assets shifted and recalculated. Inside the house, Evan Calder wondered what kind of truth was dangerous enough to follow someone to his door, and what it would cost him to keep it inside. He tried. He lay on his back and stared at the dark ceiling while the wind pressed against the old windows. Every small sound felt like a warning. The house knew his routine, and the quiet usually comforted him, but tonight the silence felt like it was waiting for something to happen. He got up twice to check the sensor display near the front door. Each time it showed empty fields, low heat signatures from sleeping animals, and the faint static of distant patrol activity. Nothing close enough to panic about, but enough to keep his nerves tight. Near dawn, the sky turned from black to deep blue. The first weak light touched the edges of the grasslands around his property. That was when Evan finally heard movement inside the house again. Footsteps, careful and soft. He stood from the couch where he had ended up, shock pistol still within reach, and watched the hallway. Salith appeared slowly at the end of it. She looked steadier than before, but her face still held a tired stiffness, like someone refusing to admit pain. The bandage at her side was visible beneath the borrowed shirt he had given her. It fit her awkwardly, stretched at the shoulders and loose at the waist. She paused when she saw him awake. "You did not enter sleep cycle," she said. Evan gave a small shrug. "I did, just poorly." She studied him as if that answer was data. "Humans sometimes do that when under threat." "Funny," Evan said. "So do humans." Salith's mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile, but something close. She walked to the kitchen table and sat across from him with careful control. Evan poured 2 cups of water and set one in front of her. She picked it up, sniffed it, and drank without hesitation. That told him something too. If she was willing to drink from a human cup in a human house, she was either desperate or far more certain than she let on. "Your wound?" Evan asked. "It is sealed," she replied. "Your medical compound is inefficient but adequate." "I'll take that as praise," she blinked once. "It is an observation." Evan leaned back, folding his arms. "So, start talking." Salith's gaze shifted briefly toward the window. The curtains were still drawn, but light bled around the edges. "Coalition units will continue local search patterns for approximately 12 hours, she said. "Then they will widen the grid." "You sound sure," Evan replied. "I have reviewed their operating standards," she said. "I helped archive them." "Archivist," Evan muttered, "still feels strange." "It should not," she said. "My role is to preserve what is true even when others prefer it forgotten." Evan drummed his fingers on the table. "And what truth got you hunted?" Salith's eyes rested on him again, steady and sharp. "Do you know why humans are classified as auxiliaries?" Evan frowned. "Because we're new, because we're, I don't know, rough around the edges, not advanced enough." "That is the public explanation," she said. Evan's stomach tightened. "What's the private one?" Salith took a slow breath, as if preparing to speak in a language that could cut her. "Humans are not considered weak," she said. "Humans are considered unstable." Evan stared at her. "Unstable how?" "In many ways," she replied. "Biologically, you are average. Your strength, your senses, your endurance, nothing unusual compared to other spacefaring species. But your minds do not behave as expected." Evan let out a quiet, tired laugh. "That's news to me." Salith did not laugh back. "Coalition predictive systems rely on behavior modeling. Most species respond to fear, reward, and authority in consistent patterns. They accept hierarchy. They accept limits. They accept the idea that the system knows best." Evan's eyes narrowed. "And humans don't." "Not reliably," Salith said. "Humans sometimes obey, humans sometimes cooperate, but when pressed, humans also resist in ways that are difficult to predict. Humans will break rules if rules appear unfair. Humans will risk personal safety if they believe another is in danger. Humans will destroy their own advantage if they think it makes a point." Evan thought of protests back on the core worlds, of strikes, of stubborn communities that refused relocation orders. He had seen humans fight over nothing and sacrifice for strangers in the same day. "Okay," he said carefully, "so we're annoying." Salith's expression remained serious. "Annoying is manageable, contagious defiance is not." Evan's throat went dry. "Contagious." "Yes," she said. "Humans influence others. When humans refuse, others sometimes begin to refuse as well. When humans question authority, others sometimes begin to question. Humans do not simply resist control. Humans invite others to imagine life without it." The words sat heavy in the small kitchen. Evan rubbed his jaw. "That still doesn't explain why you're bleeding on my table." Salith reached into the pocket of the oversized shirt. Her fingers moved slowly, as if the motion hurt. She removed a small device, thin, dark, and shaped like a flat coin. She placed it on the table between them. Evan stared at it. "What is that?" "A fragment," she said. "A storage node, part of a larger archive." Evan did not touch it. "Why bring it here?" "Because it contains proof," she replied. "Proof of what?" Salith's voice dropped slightly, as if the walls might hear. "Proof that the Coalition has been limiting human expansion intentionally," she said. "Not through open war, through guidance, through selective access. Through manipulated trade, delayed technology transfer, and engineered political pressure." Evan felt cold spread through his chest. "That sounds like conspiracy talk." "It is documentation," Salith said. "Signed records, operational directives, predictive assessments." "It is not rumor." Evan's mind raced. He had always believed humans were simply behind, always catching up. He had cursed human leaders for being weak negotiators and cursed himself for leaving the official system behind. He had told himself the galaxy was unfair but not personal. Salith watched him closely, as if waiting for a specific reaction. Evan swallowed. "Why would they do that?" Salith tilted her head. "Because you frighten them." Evan barked another laugh, but this time it sounded rough. "We're farmers and mechanics compared to them. Half our colonies can't even get clean fuel shipments without begging." "And yet," Salith said, "when humans do receive resources, they build quickly, they adapt quickly." They find new uses for old tools. They repurpose. They improvise. They do not wait for authorization. Evan's hands clenched on the table. So they keep us starved and call it peace. Yes. Outside, a faint hum rolled over the fields. Evan froze. He stood quickly and moved to the sensor display. The screen showed a drone passing at medium altitude, scanning heat patterns in long sweeps. It was farther out than last night, but its path was coming closer. Evan returned to the table, jaw tight. They're searching. Yes, Salith said, they will scan dwellings that appear irregular. I'm irregular, Evan muttered. You are outside their expectations, Salith replied. That is why you were chosen. Evan stared at her. Chosen by who, you? Not by me alone, she said. By models. Evan's eyes narrowed again. Wait, you said coalition models can't predict humans well. They cannot predict all humans well, she corrected. But they attempt. They gather data constantly, and sometimes they find patterns. Sometimes they estimate a high probability that a certain human will respond in a useful way. Evan felt a flash of anger. So I'm part of your math? Salith did not flinch. You are part of reality. That's not comforting, Evan said. I do not intend comfort, Salith replied. I intend survival. Evan leaned forward, voice low. If you have proof of this, why not take it to human authorities? Salith's eyes shifted. Your authorities are influenced. The coalition does not only shape trade and technology. It shapes who rises to leadership through incentives and pressure. Humans who cooperate receive benefits. Humans who resist face obstacles. Evan's thoughts went to politicians who suddenly gained coalition partnerships and security support. He had always assumed it was diplomacy. Now it looked like a leash. So you're saying even if I handed this to the nearest human office, it might be buried, Evan said. Yes, Salith replied, or you would be arrested for holding it. Evan exhaled slowly. And you came here because I'm off-grid. You are outside the standard channels, Salith said. Your systems are not integrated, your communications are limited, you are harder to monitor. Evan glanced at the corner where an old relay console sat, covered by a cloth and half hidden behind stacked crates. He had not used it in years. It was an artifact from earlier settlement days, when humans built their own networks and tried to keep them independent. Why do you speak human standard so well? He asked suddenly. Salith's gaze sharpened. Because I studied humans. Why would an alien archivist study humans that hard? Evan asked. She was quiet for a moment. Because I was curious, she finally said. And because my superiors ordered it. Evan frowned. Ordered it for what? Salith placed her fingers on the small storage node on the table, not activating it, just touching it like a promise. Coalition leadership fears two things, she said. Sudden uprisings and slow cultural shifts. Humans can cause both. Evan let out a breath. Okay, let's say you're right. Let's say this is real. Why risk your life to tell anyone? Why not stay quiet and survive? Salith's eyes darkened, and Evan saw something there that was not just intelligence. It was disgust. It was anger. Because silence becomes permission, she said. I archived a century of manipulation. I watched species lose parts of themselves, their languages simplified, their customs optimized, their choices narrowed, not by force but by gentle shaping. Evan's throat tightened. And humans, Salith hesitated. Humans resisted, often without knowing why. They kept producing unwanted ideas. They kept building unsanctioned systems. They kept forming informal alliances. Even when their leaders agreed to limits, humans found ways around them. Evan's eyes drifted again to the old relay. He had built part of it himself, back when he still believed in the larger human project. He remembered the feeling of connecting distant farms and stations into a shared network, one not controlled by coalition gateways. He had shut it down when coalition integration inspectors came around. He had told himself it was better to avoid trouble. Now that choice felt like regret sitting in his chest. Evan stood and walked to the console. He pulled the cloth away, dust lifted in the air. Salith watched him with intense focus. You know what that is, Evan said without looking at her. Yes, she replied. A human relay node, old model, adaptable, difficult to lock. Evan brushed his fingers along the panel. It's dead, no power feed, no network. It may not be dead, Salith said softly, if it was built like humans build. Evan gave a humorless smile. With stubbornness and spare parts? Yes, she said. With redundancy. Evan opened a side compartment and stared at the wiring. It was messy, patched, and modified, not pretty but functional. He grabbed a toolkit and began working. He did not fully understand why he was doing it, not yet. Maybe he wanted proof. Maybe he wanted options. Maybe he was angry enough that his hands needed something to do. Salith rose slowly and came closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "What do you intend?" she asked. Evan tightened a connector. "I intend not to get caught with an alien in my spare room and no plan." Salith watched his hands. "You plan quickly." "I build quickly," Evan corrected. "Planning comes later." She seemed to accept that. Evan rerouted power from an auxiliary solar bank into the relay console. The screen flickered and then went black again. He frowned and tapped the side. "Come on." Salith's eyes narrowed slightly. "Strike it harder." Evan looked at her. "What?" "In your recordings," she said, "humans often strike malfunctioning devices." Evan stared, then snorted despite himself. "That's not always smart." "But it is often effective," Salith replied. Evan shook his head and gave the panel a careful thump. The screen sparked, glowed faintly, then lit up with a dusty boot sequence. Evan blinked. "Well, great, you were right." Salith's face showed a hint of satisfaction. "Humans create systems that respond to emotional pressure." "That's one way to say it," Evan muttered. The console displayed a warning, Network UNSYNCED. Manual link required. Evan's fingers moved faster. He opened a hidden menu and accessed old frequency tables. Some were probably outdated, but human networks were like weeds. If even one node remained alive, it might answer. He tried a few manual pings, nothing. He tried again, adjusting the signal, widening the band. A faint response appeared on the screen, barely a whisper, like someone answering from very far away. Evan's breath caught. "No way." Salith leaned closer, eyes fixed on the display. "You have a connection." "Barely," Evan said. "But yes, someone's out there." Evan began typing, hands steady now. Before he could send anything, the house sensors pinged again. He froze. The display near the door flashed with a new signature, low-altitude craft approaching. Not a drone this time, something heavier. Salith straightened. "They are closer than expected." Evan's pulse hammered. "How long?" "Minutes," she said. Evan cursed under his breath. He ran to the window and lifted the curtain slightly, peering out. A sleek coalition skimmer moved over the grass, silent and smooth. It was not flying high. It was hunting, scanning in a tight pattern. Evan dropped the curtain. "Okay, we're done being calm." Salith's eyes locked on his. "Do you have a hiding space?" Evan nodded. "Basement." "Old storm shelter. No signature if I shut the vents." "Then do it," she said. Evan moved quickly, grabbing the storage node from the table and stuffing it into his pocket without thinking. He grabbed a small pack, shoved water, food bars, and a handheld transmitter inside, then rushed to the spare room. Salith was already there, pulling on boots and adjusting the borrowed clothing to reduce loose folds that might catch. Evan opened a floor panel in the hallway and revealed a narrow stairwell leading down. The air that rose from it smelled of soil and old wood. "Go," Evan said. Salith descended first, careful but fast. Evan followed, pulling the panel shut above them. Darkness wrapped around them, broken only by Evan's small wrist light. They reached the storm shelter, a reinforced room with thick walls and a heavy door. Evan shut it, latched it, and turned off the ventilation fan. The sudden quiet was intense. They sat in the dark, listening. Above them, faint vibrations moved through the floor. Something had landed. Evan held his breath. A mechanical voice echoed faintly through the house, amplified by external speakers. "Unregistered dwelling, open for verification." Evan closed his eyes. The coalition did not ask twice. Footsteps moved across the porch. Metal touched the door. A soft electronic pulse followed, like a lock being overridden. Evan's hands clenched. His shock pistol was in his belt, but he knew it would do nothing against a full coalition unit. If they came down here, it would end fast. Salith sat motionless, eyes open even in the dim light. She looked like a statue built for patience. The voices above moved through the house. Smooth, controlled, unemotional. They opened cabinets, they scanned walls. Evan heard the soft hum of a detection field sweeping. His heart pounded harder. Then a new sound joined the search noise, a faint crackling, like the relay console powering up again as the coalition scanned it. Evan's mind raced. If they saw that relay, they would know he had active comms outside the regulated network. That alone could ruin him. With Salith here, it would be fatal. Salith leaned slightly toward him in the dark. Her voice was barely a breath. "Humans sometimes distract predators," she whispered. Evan stared at her. "How?" Salith's gaze flicked upward. "Noise, conflict, confusion." Evan understood. She was suggesting he create a false trail. He swallowed hard. His mind grabbed for options. He had one. Evan pulled the handheld transmitter from the pack. It was a simple tool used for local farm equipment, not regulated by coalition networks. It could produce an emergency beacon if modified. He adjusted the frequency, his fingers moving by habit. Then he hesitated. If he triggered it, coalition sensors might chase it, but it might also bring more attention to the area. It was a risk either way. Salith watched him, waiting. She did not pressure him. That in itself felt strange. Many humans would have begged, demanded, cried. She simply waited, as if she trusted his decision. Evan clicked the transmitter on and set it to pulse in a pattern that mimicked an old distress signal. Then he slid it into a small pipe opening connected to the drainage system beneath the house. The pulses would travel through the ground, not strong, but enough to suggest movement away from the shelter. He shut the pipe opening again. Above them, the coalition search voices shifted. A sharper tone entered, like interest. Signal detected, source moving, track. Evan's breath caught, footsteps above turned sudden and fast. The coalition units moved back toward the front of the house. Evan heard the door open again, then silence. Minutes passed. Evan did not move until his muscles began to ache. Finally, he heard the skimmer lift off, a gentle vibration fading into distance. He waited longer because hope could be a trap. Only when his sensors, connected through the shelter's passive lines, showed nothing nearby did he let himself breathe. He turned the ventilation fan back on. Fresh air moved in slowly. Salith spoke first. "You have just committed a significant offense." Evan let out a shaky laugh. "I committed that the moment I opened the door." Salith's eyes held something almost like respect. "You improvised without instructions." "That's my whole life," Evan said, wiping sweat from his forehead. He climbed back up cautiously and cracked the floor panel open. The house was upside down. Cabinets open, drawers pulled out, the relay console exposed. But nothing was broken. Coalition units did not destroy what they might need later. They simply cataloged it. Evan stepped fully into the hallway and looked around, anger rising in his chest. It was his home, and they had walked through it like it belonged to them. Salith emerged behind him, slow but steady. Evan moved to the relay console. The screen still glowed faintly. The coalition scan had not shut it down. He stared at it, then turned to Salith. "You said you have proof," he said. "Yes," she replied. "And you said human authorities might bury it," he said. "Yes." Evan's jaw tightened. "Then we don't go through them." Salith watched him carefully. "What do you propose?" Evan looked at the relay screen, at the weak connection still flickering. He thought of scattered settlements like his, people who fixed machines with tape and grit, people who ignored politics because politics had never fed them, people who still remembered what it meant to build things without permission. "I propose," Evan said, voice low, "we tell the ones who don't ask permission either." Salith's eyes widened slightly, just a fraction. "You intend to contact civilians," she said. Evan nodded. "The ones who still have old nodes, the ones who still know how to listen." Salith took a slow breath. "That is extremely unpredictable." Evan gave her a hard look. "You came here because humans are unpredictable. Don't change your mind now." For a moment, Salith was silent. Then she nodded once. "Very well," she said. "If you do this, the coalition will escalate." Evan's hands hovered over the console keys. "Let them," he said. He began to type. Not a long message, not a plan, just enough. A human-style signal burst into the old network, carrying a simple statement in plain words. "An alien archivist is here. She has proof the coalition has been controlling human growth. If you can hear this, respond." He pressed send. The relay hummed, straining as if the device itself was old but proud to be used again. Evan watched the screen. Seconds passed. Then a reply blinked into existence, short, rough, and unmistakably human. "Who is this?" Evan swallowed. His pulse jumped. He typed back, "Evan Calder, Edge Settlement, off-grid. I'm not kidding. They searched my house. They're hunting her." Another pause, then another message came. "Prove it." Evan looked at Salith. "They want proof." Salith reached for the small storage node. Her fingers hovered over it. "If I release data fragments," she said, "it will create a pattern the coalition can detect." Evan's throat tightened. "If we don't, no one will believe us." Salith's gaze was steady. "Then we choose the least harmful truth first." She tapped the node lightly against the console. The relay accepted it with a soft click, like it recognized old human stubbornness and made space for it. The screen filled with symbols, then translated into human text. Operational directives, trade limitations, technology access delays, predictive risk assessments. Evan's chest tightened as he read a few lines. It was real, cold and official. Not hatred, not anger, just control written like mathematics. He selected the smallest portion, stripped identifying marks, and sent it out into the network. It was like throwing a spark into dry grass. The relay began to receive more pings, more replies, more connections. Some were cautious, some were angry, some were disbelieving, but they were listening. Salith watched the growing stream of signals, her face unreadable. "What happens now?" Evan asked quietly. Salith looked at him, and for the first time her voice carried something close to fear. "Now," she said, "humans begin doing what the Coalition fears most." Evan swallowed. "And what's that?" he asked. Salith's eyes shifted toward the windows, toward the brightening morning beyond the curtains. "Sharing," she said, "without permission." Evan stared at the screen as more messages arrived, faster now, overlapping and chaotic in the way only human communication could be. He knew something had changed. The knock in the night had not just brought an alien into his home. It had opened a door inside the whole region, one that could not be shut again. And somewhere out there, beyond the grasslands and patrol routes, people were waking up, reading the first pieces of truth and making choices. Evan had no idea what those choices would be. That was the terrifying part. That was also the hope. Evan had never heard it work this hard before. The old machine vibrated softly, like it was straining to keep up with the sudden flood of connections. Lines of text scrolled across the screen in uneven bursts. Some messages were clean and careful. Others were messy, full of spelling errors and emotional reactions. All of them carried the same thing beneath the words: attention. People were listening. Evan stood with his hands resting on the edge of the table, staring at the display. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, but adrenaline kept him upright. He had not planned this. He had not prepared speeches or gathered allies. He had simply opened a door and refused to close it again. Salith sat nearby, watching everything in silence. She looked more alert now, the pain in her posture less sharp, but there was tension in her shoulders that had not been there before. This was no longer a quiet escape. This was exposure. Messages continued to arrive. "Where did you get this data? Is this a trick?" "Coalition manipulation makes sense. We've suspected this for years. You're going to get people killed." Evan rubbed his face and let out a slow breath. "They're arguing already?" "Yes," Salith said. "That is expected." Evan glanced at her. "You sound calm." "I am not," she replied honestly, "but I am familiar with this phase." "What phase?" Evan asked. "The moment when truth stops being private," Salith said. "After this, control becomes difficult." Evan looked back at the screen. Someone had sent coordinates. Another had sent a request for raw files. A third demanded proof of Salith's identity. Evan typed carefully, not sharing everything yet. "Coalition is tracking signals. We move slow or we die fast." A reply came almost immediately. "Who's we?" Evan hesitated, then typed. "Me and the alien. She's real, she's hurt, she's scared, and she's risking everything." He pressed send. For a moment there was silence on the relay, then a new message appeared, short and blunt. "That's enough for me." Evan blinked. "That was fast." Salith leaned forward slightly. "Humans sometimes decide quickly when emotion aligns with belief." "Yeah," Evan muttered. "Sometimes too quickly." The relay beeped again. More messages stacked up. Evan noticed patterns forming. Small clusters of responses began to reference each other. People were comparing notes, cross-checking histories, talking about trade delays, canceled shipments, strange political pressure. It was happening faster than Evan expected. Salith's eyes tracked the data flow with professional focus. "They are doing independent verification." "That's good, right?" Evan asked. "It is dangerous," she said, "but yes, it is effective." Evan leaned back in his chair and let himself breathe for a second. "So what now? We can't just dump everything." "No," Salith agreed. "Full release would trigger immediate containment." Evan frowned. "Containment how?" Salith's voice was quiet. "By force, if necessary. The Coalition avoids open violence when possible, but not when stability is threatened." Evan thought of the skimmer landing in his field. Thought of armored figures walking through his home like it was a warehouse. "Then we drip it," he said, "just enough to keep people asking questions." Salith looked at him. "That is a human strategy," Evan shrugged. "It's how we survive bigger things." The relay chimed again. A new connection request came through, flagged differently than the rest. It used an older encryption style one Evan had not seen in years. His eyes widened. "No way. What is it?" Salith asked. Evan stared at the identifier. "That's a maintenance net, old colony workers. Engineers, dock hands, people who kept things running while officials took credit." Salith tilted her head. "They are not part of centralized authority." "No," Evan said. "They hate centralized authority." The message opened automatically. "Saw your ping, we still have nodes." "A few, what do you need?" Evan's pulse jumped. He typed quickly, spread the word quietly. "Verify what you can, don't go loud yet." The reply came back slower this time. "Too late for quiet, people are already talking." Evan grimaced. "They're right." Salith watched the exchange closely. "Human networks propagate faster than coalition estimates." "That's because we don't wait for permission," Evan said. Salith nodded. "Yes, that." The house sensors pinged softly. Evan stiffened and glanced at the display. Nothing immediate. Distant movement only, but the coalition would not ignore this spike in unauthorized communication forever. "We need to move," Evan said. Salith's eyes sharpened. "Where?" Evan hesitated. "I don't know yet, but staying here is asking to be surrounded." Salith rose slowly, testing her balance. She was steadier now, but still not fully healed. "I can travel if necessary." "You shouldn't," Evan said. "That wound will heal," she interrupted. "Capture will not." Evan nodded reluctantly. "Okay, then we plan." He walked to the storage room and pulled out an old map, printed on flexible material. It showed back routes, unregistered paths, places coalition patrols rarely bothered to check. Salith studied it with interest. "You prepared for isolation?" "Yeah," Evan said. "I didn't prepare for this." The relay chimed again, louder this time. A new message pushed through the clutter, marked urgent. "Coalition COMMS traffic spike detected. They know something is wrong." Evan's stomach dropped. "That didn't take long." Salith's voice was tight. "They will attempt narrative control first." "Meaning?" Evan asked. "Disinformation," she said. "They will label this as a hoax, then a security threat, then a human extremist movement." Evan snorted. "They always jump to extremist." "Yes," Salith replied. "It simplifies justification." The relay screen flashed again. A new message appeared, forwarded from another node. "Coalition news release incoming. They're calling this unauthorized alien manipulation." Saying the data is fabricated, Evan clenched his fists. "Of course they are." Salith closed her eyes briefly. "This is expected." Evan looked at her. "You okay?" She opened her eyes. "I archived similar events. I never participated." "Well," Evan said grimly, "welcome to the field." Another message arrived. "If this is fake, why are they reacting so hard?" Evan smiled faintly despite everything. "Humans ask good questions." Salith watched the screen as replies stacked up. Arguments formed, doubts spread, not doubt of the data, but doubt of the coalition's story. "They are losing control of the narrative," Salith said softly. "For now," Evan replied. "They'll push back." As if summoned by his words, the sensors pinged again. This time the alert was sharper, multiple contacts, high-speed approach. Evan felt his heart slam against his ribs. "They're coming." Salith's posture straightened. "Then we leave, now." Evan rushed to the relay and began disconnecting key components. He could not shut it down completely, too many people were already connected, but he could remove the parts that tied it directly to his location. "Can you slow them?" he asked Salith. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a thin device Evan had not seen before. "Briefly," she said, "it will create signal noise, not enough to hide us, but enough to confuse targeting." "Do it," Evan said. Salith activated the device. The air hummed faintly, and the relay screen flickered as interference rippled through the frequencies. Evan grabbed his pack and slung it over his shoulder. He handed Salith another jacket, thicker than the borrowed shirt. "Put this on," he said. "We're going cold." They moved quickly but quietly, slipping out through the back of the house and into the tall grass. The morning light had fully arrived now, washing the fields in pale gold. It looked peaceful, which made the danger feel unreal. They moved low, following a shallow drainage path that cut away from the house. Evan knew these routes well. He had dug some of them himself. Behind them, the sound of engines grew louder. "They're landing," Evan whispered. Salith nodded. "They will search aggressively." They moved faster. The grass brushed against Evan's legs, wet with morning dew. His lungs burned, but he kept going. Salith kept pace surprisingly well, her movements smooth despite the injury. They reached a small ridge and slid down into a narrow ravine. Evan pulled a mesh covering over them, blending their heat signatures with the ground. They lay still. Coalition skimmers passed overhead, scanning. Evan held his breath until his chest ached. Minutes stretched. Finally, the noise moved away, spreading outward. Evan exhaled slowly. That was close. Salith did not relax. It will get closer. Evan looked at her. You said this phase was familiar. What comes next? Salith's gaze was distant. Escalation, attempts to isolate leaders, attempts to divide supporters, offers to cooperate quietly. Bribes, Evan said. Yes, Salith replied, and threats. Evan thought of messages already arguing among themselves, some calling for caution, others for action. Humans were good at resisting external pressure, but they were also very good at fighting each other. We need to keep this from turning into chaos, Evan said. Salith looked at him. Chaos is already here, Evan grimaced. Then we guide it. They stayed hidden until the sensors in Evan's wrist unit showed the patrols moving farther away. When it was clear enough, they moved again, traveling toward a small maintenance outpost Evan knew had been abandoned years ago. It took hours. By the time they reached it, the sun was high, and Evan's legs trembled with exhaustion. The outpost was little more than a concrete shell half buried in dirt, its doors rusted but intact. Inside, it was cool and dark. Evan dropped his pack and leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Salith sat slowly, her face pale but focused. We can't stay long, Evan said. But this buys us time, Salith nodded. Time is valuable. Evan pulled out the relay components he had saved. He connected them to a portable power source and re-established limited contact. The network was louder now, much louder. Messages poured in faster than he could read them. Some were angry, some were frightened, some were hopeful. A few were clearly coalition plans pushing doubt and fear. Salith watched the patterns. They are attempting infiltration, Evan sighed. Figures. He typed a short message and sent it broadly. No leaders, no commands, share what you can verify, protect each other. If someone asks you to centralize, don't. Replies came back almost immediately. That's messy, that's dangerous, that's human. Evan smiled grimly. Salith tilted her head. You are encouraging decentralization. Yeah, Evan said. Harder to cut the head off if there isn't one? Salith considered that. The coalition will adapt. Let them try, Evan replied. We adapt faster. The relay suddenly flashed red. A warning appeared, signal trace attempt detected. Evan cursed. They're trying to locate us through the relay. Salith leaned forward. Then we move again. Evan nodded and shut the system down. We can't be the center, that defeats the point. They packed up quickly and exited the outpost through a side tunnel that led to a dry riverbed. From there, they moved toward higher ground, away from predictable routes. As they walked, Evan felt the weight of what he had started settle on him. People were listening. People were reacting. Some would make good choices, some would make terrible ones. All this because you knocked on my door, he said quietly. Salith walked beside him. No, all this because you opened it. Evan glanced at her. You could have chosen someone else. Yes, she said, many times. Why me? He asked. Salith was silent for a long moment. Then she said, because you did not ask what you would gain. Evan frowned. I don't get it. When most humans are offered dangerous truth, Salith said, they ask how it benefits them. You asked who else it might help. Evan swallowed. He had not thought of it that way. They reached the ridge by late afternoon. From there, Evan could see the distant shimmer of patrol routes, coalition craft moving like insects across the land. His wrist unit buzzed again. He glanced at it. New messages were still coming, even without his relay active. Humans were relaying through each other now, bouncing signals, sharing fragments. The truth was moving without him. That's kind of terrifying, Evan said. Salith watched the horizon. Yes. And kind of amazing, Evan added. Yes, Salith agreed softly. Evan sat down on a rock, exhaustion finally winning. Salith sat nearby watching the sky. They will come after you harder, Evan said. You know that, right? Yes, she replied. And after anyone who helps, he continued. Yes, Evan looked at her. Do you regret it? Salith did not answer immediately. When she did, her voice was steady. No, she said. For the first time since I began archiving, events are not merely recorded, they are changing. Evan nodded slowly. Humans have a habit of doing that. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the land. Somewhere out there, coalition leaders were recalculating. Somewhere else, humans were arguing, planning, and refusing to forget what they had seen. Evan leaned back and closed his eyes for just a moment. He did not know how this would end. He only knew it would not be quiet.